Thank you all for getting here promptly and letting us get started. These next 4 hours are going to be full of learning and opportunity for reflection for you. And we wanted to be sure that we got started on time. I'm assuming that the mic is working. No awful feedback out there. We're going to be sharing the mic among 4 of us today, so there'll be moments when it'll be when you'll hear some crackle and snuffle and all that kind of stuff as we share the mic between ourselves or among ourselves. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Karen Stocks-Glover. My title is Instructional Program Manager, which means that I work out of the district office and I work under the direction of our Assistant District Administrator, Alice Murphy, who is in charge of all curriculum and instruction. I was, at one point in time, a high school English teacher at Sun Prairie High School. Those are my peeps. 17 years in the classroom, 8 of those at Sun Prairie High School with the best educators I'd ever met throughout the high school. I have always said, and it is true, that my heart is in a high school. I'm a secondary person, and I wanted to be sure that I gathered all of our secondary people together this summer so that we could be looking at some of the critical changes that are happening for us with the introduction of the Common Core, and specifically for literacy in all seniors. I'm going to begin by pointing out to you our shared goal. So it doesn't matter if you're a kindergarten teacher or a teacher of juniors and seniors. It doesn't matter if you teach music or Phi-Ed or English or social studies. Our common goal across the district is that every child, every student will be career and college ready. And so as we march ourselves into this year, and we get ourselves pumped up for this year, and when we hit those dips during the course of the year, we have to remember that this is our common goal. That we come back every day, we put on our armor, we pump our iron, and we do what we have to do to make sure that every student is college and career ready. Not just some of them, all of them. I have a graphic up here to sort of capture much of what we're going to be talking about and have been talking about in this district. And I want you to take a moment just to look at it. Look at the language in the different cells. Walk your way around it a couple of times. While you're walking your way around it, ask yourself, what do I know about any of these? What do I need to know about all of these? Because each one of those components is critical for our ability to reach that goal. Lauren, what did I say our common goal was? Okay. So every student will be career and college ready. And in order to do that, we have to pay attention to all those things up there. Now let's be clear. Do we already do much of that? Of course. You're phenomenal. But we have to get intentional about it. We have to get reflective about it. And we have to use good data to help us make sure that we're doing it well. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to sort of give you a sense of how this day is going to go. You have lots of paper in front of your hand. But as you know, today is the first day of many days this week when you will have the opportunity to hear from a variety of leaders in this district and leaders outside of this district to help you think about the tools that you need and the thoughts that you want to have related to that common goal. You're going to hear Alice Murphy speak to you on Wednesday. You're going to be working with your building administrators, looking at your building data and talking about your building goals on Wednesday or Thursday, Friday. You're going to be working with your departments or your teams, continuing to have those conversations. You're going to hear from Dr. Culver, who's going to speak to you on his opening day. You're going to hear from Gloria Ladson-Billings, who is our keynote speaker. And throughout the week, all of these themes are going to be readdressed and replayed by a number of people. So honestly, I feel like the warm-up act to the Rolling Stones. I'm not really the highlight of the tour, but I'm happy to be on the tour. And we have our own rock and roll star with us here today, Doug Buell, who's going to be our facilitator for part of the morning. And we have two rockettes, Megan O'Brien and Rebecca Griffin, who are going to get up here shortly and help with this as well. So those are our facilitators for today, and that gives you an overview of the week. The agenda is simple. I'm going to speak to you for a little while, and most of what I'm doing, Rebecca's doing, and Megan's doing is in this handout right here, the one that looks like this. So this is the one that you're starting with. You're going to see that there are a lot of activities in here. So we're going to be asking you to flip to pages, opening activities. You're going to want something to write with. So if you didn't pull out something to write with, you might want to dig something out right now. You have an additional packet, and that's going to be what you're going to be looking at when Doug comes up to speak. You have a copy of the Common Core Standards for Literacy in All Subjects. Okay. Did I forget anything? Okay. So just focus on this one for right now for me, okay? We are in this beautiful facility, the Performing Arts Center. Would we prefer that we were at tables where everybody could be in work groups, taking time to put your heads together, right? As we say to the kids, heads together, butts up. We just don't have that luxury. We're too big, which is a good thing. We keep getting bigger. Close to 300 students enrolling in our district in the month of August. So here we are, and there are going to be moments when it's going to be a little awkward. We're going to ask you to listen a lot, but we're also going to ask you to discuss as well. So you're going to turn and talk to your neighbor or make a little huddle. And we're just simply going to ask that when you hear the person with the mic ask you to come back together, that you try to do it rather quickly so that we can keep going with the learning that we're going to do today. This afternoon, later this morning, the last hour, you're going to be in work sessions. You're going to have an hour to plan a lesson with a literacy focus using the gradual release of responsibility, which is what you're going to learn about today. So the last hour, you're going to be in work sessions planning a lesson with your people and thinking about what does this look like in my classroom. And for some of you, as we go through the morning, we talk about the gradual release of responsibility, and you look at the lesson planning that you're going to be able to do, many of you are going to have that default response of, I already do that. I want you to question that default response as you move through the work today. Do you really already do it as regards literacy in your classroom? And what do you need to do in order to improve upon it? So as soon as you have that response of, I already do this, I want you to question it. Because we wouldn't be here if we were all already doing it. Okay? And then finally, I'm going to ask you, I think most of you are sitting by folks that you know, but I'm going to ask you to take just a minute to introduce yourself to the folks around you. And we're going to practice that talking among yourselves and coming back as a whole group. So please take a moment to introduce yourselves. Okay, let's come back together, please. Please wrap up your conversations and come back together. Please wrap up your conversations and come back together as a whole group. One more time, please wrap up your conversations and come back together as a whole group. Thank you. So I had to make the statement, please wrap up your conversations and come back together as a whole group 4 times. Let's shoot for 2 next time, okay? Okay, next slide, James. In your packet, the one that I showed you, which relates to what I'm doing here right now, open to activity number 1, please. You need a writing utensil. Take a look at the Likert Scale there. That asks you, where are you now at this moment with understanding literacy in your content area? Literacy in your content area. Make a mark on the Likert Scale. It's only for you. And then fill out the reflection box at the bottom, please. Let's do that right now. You're placing yourself on the scale and you're taking a moment to answer the reflection question in the box at the bottom of the page. Okay, let's start talking about a few things that we know and that we need to understand specifically related to adolescent literacy. First of all, we're going to continue to work under the belief that our K-5 colleagues do everything that they're supposed to do to the best of their ability to send us strong readers, strong writers, speakers, and listeners. But sometimes our kids come to us and they have some additional needs in order to get them, as we say, at grade level. And we know who those kids are, and oftentimes we find support services that can help them along. But what that doesn't address is it doesn't address the simple fact that reading, writing, speaking, and listening just change when a kid gets into the upper grades of school. It just changes. It doesn't mean that our K-5 colleagues didn't do what they were supposed to do, but everything changes. The landscape changes, and as the quotation says, the heights are higher, the inclines are steeper, and the terrain is rockier, and that's just a fact. And so what we're doing this year, what we're starting today, is we're taking ownership of that understanding and saying, you know what, I got to get on that train and be a part of that ride that helps think about what does literacy look like for an adolescent in my content area. Things change, students change. We know this. A 6th grade student looks very different from a high school senior. We have our 6th grade colleagues in here, we have our high school colleagues in here, and we all know that those kids look different as they go through the grade levels. They arrive, just as every other child, with their individualized strengths and challenges related to literacy. And as I said to you a moment ago, some of them, very few, may need help reading words. Others may need help with fluency. Others may need help with comprehension strategies. Those are our students with some of the highest needs, and we do everything that we can to make sure that we have support services in place to help those students learn what they need to learn to be successful readers, writers, speakers, and listeners. But that bottom bullet, that's the one that applies to every single person in this room. Read it, please. Every 6th through 12th grader encounters that challenge at the bottom, and all of us are responsible for addressing that challenge. So the students change, and we know that the literacy demands change. So let's take a look at some of the ways that those literacy demands change. The texts become longer, the word complexity increases, the sentence complexity increases, the structural complexity increases, graphic representations become more important, conceptual challenge increases, text begins to vary widely across content areas. All of those things are happening the moment a student becomes a secondary student in every single content area represented in this room. In the packet that I gave you, you'll see 3 columns related to science reading at an elementary level, at a middle level, and at a high school level. Right on the back side of the Likert Scale that you just did. Take a moment, please, to look at a science topic as it is written about at the elementary level, at the middle level, and at the high school level. So I have the pleasure of working on a daily basis with Chris Mueller. Some of you remember Chris from our high school days together. Chris is out there somewhere. There she is. Oh, there she is. Chris was a science teacher at the high school. Her heart is always in a science classroom, just as mine is always in an English classroom. And I showed her this when I was preparing to do this morning, and I thought, Chris, there is no way that I can read that far right column. I have no idea what any of that says or means, and I wouldn't even begin to know how to help students access that text. Now, I'm a highly literate woman. I was a darn good English teacher. I write well, I speak well, I read often. There's no way that I would be successful or very good at helping students access that text on the far right. But Chris can, and Dayton can, and Robin Kateman can. But they're science teachers. This is their language. That's why it's literacy in all subjects. Athena Liss is going to take apart social studies, history texts in a way that I can't even begin to do. But she's going to need to rely on me to help kids with doing a close reading of poetry. All of us have a responsibility in this game. Okay? Next slide, James. Bottom line is that we need to change. We have to be ready to beat the odds in all situations, even our most challenging. And it is time to act. Nobody gets a pass. All year long, how am I addressing literacy in my content area? Okay? You have activity number 2 in your handout. Big boxes. I'm wondering, I'm curious about, I realize that, try to identify one or two thoughts that you have related to what we just looked at regarding the changes in demands for adolescent students. Jot them down real quick for me, please. One or two thoughts. Okay, if you could wrap that up for us. I'm going to hand this mic over to Megan O'Brien, and Megan's going to take you through the next little portion of our presentation this morning. So if you want to turn back to the PowerPoint section, you can. You're going to see some data slides that Megan's going to be sharing with you. And I have to say again publicly how much I appreciate Megan's support for this project this morning. And for those of you who don't know Megan, she is a science teacher and CLC leader at the high school. So.
Can you guys hear okay? Okay. The first thing I'm going to actually have you do is turn to activity 3. So you were just at activity 2. I'm going to have you flip to activity 3 for a second. And there's a couple questions in activity 3 that I want you to be thinking out before we show you the data. So what did you observe that was specifically linked to your grade level or levels? What trends did you notice about the data over time? What words would you use to describe the achievement gaps? What words would you use to describe our students' needs? So just be thinking about that information as we flip to our data slides. And I'm just going to give you a second to take a look at the first slide on our WKCE data for the 2011-2012 school year. And this data is also in one of the slides. And as you're looking at the data, again, make sure that you're kind of jotting down what are you noticing. On the next slide, we're going to go to our Explore and Plan reading data for, again, the 2011-2012 school year. And actually, they give you the 2010 school year also, so you can compare. As you finish looking at the data, writing down your ideas, go ahead, turn to your partners, kind of huddle up, form a small group, talk about what you're starting to see. It's awful stomach here. All right, if I can have you guys start wrapping up your conversations, please. You guys are really good at that now. All right, James, I'm going to actually have you take it back a slide if that's okay. A couple of things that we wanted to point out. First of all, someone had asked, what does FAY mean? It means full academic year. So that was a really good question over on this side of the room. And that means our students were in our district for a full year before we would ever report out any kind of test results. Some of the other things with the WKCE for reading achievement, what we are taking a look at is our 2011-2012. It is our data. And we use our data all the time, and we're constantly working with data, and we're going to continue to always be working with data. But what we're seeing is based off of our old cut scores. And so when we're looking at this, we are looking at both advanced or proficient. And which is, students are typically somewhere in the low 40s for being advanced, typically on the WKCE. With the new NAEP cut scores coming in, it might be somewhere between 4 and 6% that are considered advanced. So while we're looking at this, this is based off of the old cut score, so we may end up seeing data a little bit later that is going to be slightly different, and that's based off of the new NAEP cut score. So I just wanted to make sure that that information was out there. Some of the things that I noticed when I was looking at this, when we look at our third graders, that's a difference of 19.8% between our white students and our students of color. And when we go over to our 10th graders, that's 25.5% difference between our white students and our students of color. So those are some pretty large gaps that we're taking a look at there. Yeah. Chris is going to answer. Yeah. All right, and as Chris said, you guys are going to get a lot of data this week, and you're going to have a lot of time to kind of break apart the data that you're going to be given. So hopefully some of those questions can be further answered later on in the week also. On the next slide, again, just a couple of things to point out. When we look at the reading scores for the 2010, the Explore 9 for 2010, those students were at a 3.9 point difference. And when we go to the Plan 10 for 2011, which is those same students, their point difference is a 4.6. So it definitely continues throughout. All right, on to the next slide. You guys have had a chance to kind of huddle up and share some of your ideas, some of the different trends that you saw. And then on the very last slide that I'm going to take a look at is how can you use data to revise and renew your teaching. And this is just the beginning of the data that you're going to see for this week. We're going to continue to see a lot of data and use our data. How can we use our data to renew our teaching is going to be one of the most important questions that we're going to have to answer and work on this week.
Okay, we're going to transition real quickly here to Rebecca Griffin, who's going to walk us through some additional learning related to literacy in all subjects. So I just want to again publicly thank Rebecca for coming on board and helping me out with this today. Rebecca is our reading resource specialist at the high school. We're very lucky to have her in the district.
How's that? Okay. All right, go ahead on the next slide. So often the misconception is when we hear the word literacy, the first thing that comes to mind is we're just talking about reading. In actuality, there's 5 critical components when we talk about literacy in your content area. The first one is reading. We're not just talking about their textbook. Can they read the textbook or the novel that's required by the curriculum? We're also talking about real-world texts, current event articles, lab reports, things that are out there in the real world, in college, outside of high school or middle school. Can they comprehend them? Can they make sense of it on their own? Writing, what types of things are they writing? How are they communicating this knowledge? Speaking and listening, how do they share it? How do they communicate it with others? And then lastly, which I think is probably the most critical, is your thinking processes. How do they reason through this new stuff? When they're given a new article on their own, how do they reason through it? How do you process the information and make sense of it? So all 5 of these components is what we're dealing with when we talk about literacy in the content areas. And each of these, in each of your content areas, in every classroom, once again, should be intentional, all right? It's not, a lot of you are probably looking at, okay, I include all that stuff. But once again, like Karen mentioned, we're talking, let's be intentional, all right? Phys ed classrooms, health, music, foreign language, everything. Are we being intentional in addressing all 5 of these components that are going to lead to literacy across the content areas? It's all of our responsibility. All right. Actually, on the next slide as well, go ahead and find activity 4. Before we move on, I want you to take a minute and reflect on your subject area that you teach, or subject areas if you're more than one. And at this point, just take a minute to reflect on what do you already know about implementing, actually, can I go back one more, sorry? These 5 components. So what do you already know? What do you feel comfortable on? How are you implementing those in your classroom? How are you being intentional, all right? And then after that, think about, okay, well, what do I still need to learn, right? Maybe I'm a little weak in one of those areas. So go ahead and take a minute and reflect on that one. Now, many of you at this point are probably thinking, okay, this sounds like a lot of work. So before we go any further, I want you to stop and question that. Is it more work, or maybe it's just a little different work? Maybe you have to tweak a couple of those lessons to be more intentional about each of these 5 components. Right, next one. And lucky for us, there's a lot of resources that are out there. The first one is obviously the DPI website. And really quickly, I'm going to take you through that and show you that where you can look and start to see. This is the main page, and if you go over to the left, you'll find academic standards. And right up at the top, they address the Common Core State Standards, and there's a link specifically for Common Core State Standards for Literacy in all subjects. And if you click on that, awesome page of resources. And if the one I'm going to focus on right now is if you roll to the middle of the page, you'll see resources to support each discipline. Because each of us is responsible for these 5 components, no matter what subject we teach. And I just want to share a couple of them with you. Let's say you're a music teacher, you come onto this page, you're going to click music. And here's a page specific for our music teachers. And on the right, you can see some things, building music knowledge through literacy, and they give you those suggestions of building prior knowledge and how to address vocabulary, specific vocabulary that they'll see in the music classroom. Right? And then I'm going to take you back and show you the science page, because this page has some good information, but as you'll see, each subject area has different ones, and I would encourage you to look at all different pages, because chances are you'll come across something that fits in your room as well. And on the science page, up at the top, they have classroom components. And when you click on that, the one I want to look at is, you look about your environment, classroom talk, so what kind of language should your students be using, and the one I want to click on is making your thinking visible. So as I mentioned earlier, making your thinking visible and showing them how to reason through new information is probably the most critical. And here, on this science page, it's kind of hard to read, but you'll see that they offer, okay, when we look at the Common Core standards of W whatever, that means to address literacy, you want more of students publicly presenting their findings using the appropriate technology, and a little bit less of your lab report's due today, just turn it in. Okay? So that's what they're doing, is offering suggestions of how you can incorporate these Common Core standards intentionally into your classroom. So lots of resources when you have time to go and explore our own DPI website. And then, because these Common Core standards are coming out, and right now in your packet as well, you have a copy of these literacy standards in all subject areas. Right now it's history, social studies, and science, and technical subjects. Now you might be thinking, well, my subject's not there yet. I would encourage you still to study these, become familiar with them, because if you cross subject areas, you'll start to notice that some of those skills are very similar. The text or the medium for understanding that skill might change a little bit. So what other organizations could help you? One specific to your subject area. So the National Council for Teachers of English, NCTE. National Council for Teachers of Science. Right? Whatever your professional national organization is will offer many resources that you can start to inform yourself. So you're not in this alone. There's a lot of great places to start looking. All right, next one. You can keep that packet out and as well turn to activity 5. We're going to spend a little time right now deconstructing a couple of those standards. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to model and walk you through this gradual release of responsibility that you're going to be working with today. So the idea, many of you are probably familiar with this already, or you might have heard about it. The idea of this framework is that you start with you as the expert, modeling and thinking aloud for the students, and all they do is watch. The next step would then be, all right, they try it, or you do it again, but they help. They start to offer suggestions and lead you to the next step. Then eventually it would become, all right, you guys try it together in small groups. And the last step of this would obviously be, all right, you try it on your own. I'm going to shift the responsibility and the ownership of this skill or this task to you on your own, and you try it. So we're going to do this with this first standard, and I believe it's under science, but it could also be in math and, like I said, across the content areas. I'm going to reason through it out loud, so I'm going to do a think aloud. And I'm looking for, at the bottom, you can see, I want to pick out the knowledge that students are responsible for. So what are they supposed to know? But then the key point is, then what are their skills? What are they supposed to do with it, right? So if I read that, translating quantitative or technical information expressed in words in a text into visual form, so a table or a chart, and translating it to visual or mathematically into words. All right, I might have to read that again. But if I look at it slowly, I can start to pick out the knowledge. What are they supposed to know? Well, it looks like this one is dealing with quantitative and technical information, whether it's in a graph or maybe it's in a paragraph form. All right? Can they pick out the big informational knowledge
whatever subject area, whatever concept we're talking about. So they're expected to know that. But then what are they supposed to do with it? And the key verb in this one I can see right from the beginning is translate. So can they take it back and forth? Can I give them a graph? Can they put it into words? Can I give them a paragraph? Can they put it into a graph? So this is the standard that's asking them to take this information, visual to written or written to visual. Okay. Now the next one, right, is activity 5. All right, so here's the next slide, please. This is the next standard we're doing, and I want you to try this one together. So you might have to look at it on your own, but then turn and talk to your partner. Read this standard, think about it, try to pick out the knowledge, what are they supposed to know, and then look at what they're asking the student to do with that knowledge. All right, once you think you've got it, go ahead and turn and talk to your partner, and then we'll come back together. And really quickly, this standard applies to several content areas. All right, go ahead and start wrapping up your thoughts and your conversation. Do I have a volunteer who would like to share the knowledge and the skills that they and their row partner? Anybody? No? Not at all? Yes, Ms. Ruggles, go ahead. Right, so if you didn't hear, she said that they decided that the knowledge was determining the central idea. So having a graph, piece of reading, piece of writing, whatever it is, determining the central idea. And the skill with that would be then turning it into an accurate summary of how the key events or ideas come together and develop. People have similar things? A couple conversations I heard, and somebody asked a good question. If you were glancing through the Common Core Standards for Literacy, and you started to think, well, my subject area is not there. The piece to focus on would be the informational text for 6 through 12. That's the first page, about 3 pages in. So, reading standards for informational text. If we're sharing the common goal of getting our students college and career ready, this is the piece to focus on. Because as you all know, in the professional career world and in college, you're going to be greeted with more informational text that we need to help them reason through and think through, and those are the standards to do that. So if you wanted to start looking about doing this intentionally in your classroom, that would be a good place to start. So now we're going to release the responsibility on this next slide, and I'd like you to try it by yourself this time. So here's our next standard, and on your own, think about the knowledge. What are they expected to know? What's the skill? What are they expected to do? And then the third part to add on to this one is this standard in my classroom, how can I address this concept in the first few weeks of school here coming up? Right? All right, so if this were me, and I did this by myself, to me, the knowledge in this one is maybe I have a piece of text, maybe I have an article online, textbook, whatever it is. Looks like the knowledge they're expected to know is, can they pick out this author's point, right? So what is the purpose of this person writing this piece of text? And the skill is then, can they take that evidence or that point or that information and assess the extent to which the reasoning and evidence supports their claim. So if their claim is that Sun Prairie is the best school district in the world, okay, how does their evidence and their reasoning match up? And obviously it would if that was a pillar. So then I wanted you to think about how could you address that in your classroom? Some of you may say, you know what, I already do that. Some of you might say, well, I could do that. I do this activity in the beginning of the school year, whatever. These Common Core standards, going back to our common goal, we want to get them college and career ready. It is all of our responsibility. No matter if we teach orchestra, we teach art, we teach health, we teach fitness for life, whatever it is. We can be intentional in helping our students understand, become strategic learners and thinkers so that when they go out into college and the career world, they're able to do this independently.
Okay. Thank you all so much for walking through all of those activities with us. If you look at the last 2 pages in the packet that we gave you this morning, you will see a visual, a graphic, for the gradual release of responsibility. We want this graphic to be of use to you as you're thinking about intentionally planning lessons using the gradual release of responsibility. You'll notice that when you get to the middle of the page on that graphic, that the responsibility shifts. Responsibility shifts from the teacher to the student. And again, that's intentional. On the back of that page, you're going to see a lesson plan. This is the actual format that we're asking you to use in your groups when we dismiss you at 11 to go do that. There will be many blank copies of this out on the tables in the lobby if you want to grab an additional one. But you should be okay to just work with the one that you have there in the packet for today. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about those working groups as we get ready to dismiss to that. In just a second here, we're going to take a break, and we're going to shift to the real star of the show, who's Doug Buell. But before we do that, I want to, again, first of all, thank all of you for taking this journey with us this morning. I want to thank all of you for accepting the challenge of our shared goal, which is that every student will be career and college ready. I want to thank you for putting on your thinking caps this morning and beginning to think about what does literacy in all subjects mean. And my hope is that you have more questions than answers, because that's how good learning happens. And more than anything, I hope that you understand today that you're not alone. We got your back. The staff at the district office has your back. I, in particular, have your back. The building administrators have your back. Colleagues have your back. We're all in this together, and we have a lot of support. Okay? Again, I need to ask you please to give a hearty round of applause for these 2 young ladies over here. There are a number of people in this room who have had the pleasure, or not, of working with me over the years, and you know how I can coerce you into doing things, and so I put on my best strong arm and convinced these 2 ladies to come on board and help me out today. They are 2 of the many, many, many teacher leaders that we have in this district. And I hope that their being up here today helps you feel confident in your roles as teacher leaders in your departments, in your buildings, etc. Okay? So look at your watch. Whatever time your watch says, you have 15 minutes to stretch, get a sip of water, visit the restroom, and come on right back, please.